Welcome, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for Employee Wellbeing and DEI, supporting inclusivity throughout the employee lifecycle, presented by Human Resources Today and sponsored by Ergotron. I'm Rayvon, the webinar coordinator of Human Resources Today, and I'm thrilled to bring you guys this new session with well-earned insight on actionable steps you can take to encourage inclusive behavior throughout the employee's lifecycle. I'm really looking forward to talking today with Catherine Mattice and what I'm sure will be a fascinating and amusing conversation. Just so you know, this webinar is Sherman HRCI approved. All attendees that stay for at least 50 minutes, that's 50, will receive an email with the activity IDs within 48 hours. And since we are recording today's session, we will also be sending the you'll also be able to view the recording and the slides to this session on the exact same landing page within 48 hours as well. We're going to go ahead and send the landing page link to the chat box right now. Up next, before we go any further, I do want to make sure we thank Ergotron for sponsoring this webinar and helping us to make it happen. Through its 40-year history, Ergotron has led the industry with innovative, professional-grade products and customer-focused service. The company has earned more than 200 patents and established a growing portfolio of award-winning brands, including WorkFit and CareFit, and patent Constant Force and Life Connects technologies. Ergotron is headquartered in St. Paul, Minnesota, with a presence in North America, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. To learn more about how Ergotron can help you, visit ergotron.com. Thanks again, Ergotron. Up next, let's go ahead and get some technical things out the way. Please feel free to ask questions throughout today's session to get even more fresh insights from Catherine. She will be taking brief breaks to answer any burning questions you may have about the content, so don't be afraid to ask your questions. You can do so by submitting them into the questions panel on the right side of your screen. My wonderful colleague Tara will be fielding your questions today. She'll be happy to answer anything you might have, so pull up the questions panel and say hello to let her know that you're listening. Lastly, if you guys have any audio issues during today's presentation, you may choose to dial in by phone. You can do so by selecting the More button in the upper right portion of your screen and then select the Switch to Phone option. Up next, today we will be hearing from Catherine Mattice. Today is going to be such a fantastic session. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Catherine to get us started.
I feel like the precedent's been set. This better be an amazing webinar. My name is Catherine Mattice. I am the founder and CEO of Civility Partners. And just to tell you a little bit about where we came from and how we got started, I used to be the director of human resources for an organization long time ago in a previous life, and found myself working with somebody who I would say was bullying. This person was an uber excessive micromanager. He yells, he made it very clear if he liked you or did not like you. He had lots of turnover in his department. He was a frustrating individual to interact with. And so while I was working there, I decided to get my master's degree in communication, and I ended up doing all of my graduate research on the topic of workplace bullying and harassment. And workplace bullying is a super niche of mine. You'll be hard pressed to find somebody who knows as much about workplace bullying as I do. So right out of graduate school, I started Civility Partners. I wrote my first book, Back Off, Your Kick-Ass Guide to Ending Bullying at Work. And Ken Blanchard wrote the foreword for me, so that was exciting. Since then, I've written 2 other books and have served a huge array of industries with my team. We're a team of 7, and we have, served everyone from the tiny little law firm down the street up to Chevron, Stanford University, General Atomics. So we've got some, we've seen it all. I've also had the pleasure over the course of time to be either cited or write articles for a lot of really cool places and appearing on CNN and things. So it's been a fun journey, and I have a lot to say about topics like the one we're going to go over today. We're going to cover a variety of things. Essentially, I'm going to take you through the employee life cycle from pre-hire all the way to exiting, and talk with you about ways in all of those various phases that you can inject, inclusivity and ensure that people are feeling included and that they're being treated equitably. I'll also say, I know a lot of times with webinars, the webinar speaker goes all the way up to the end and then there's questions at the end. I prefer to be quite a bit more interactive. So please do type your questions in along the way. Don't hold them to the end. Type them in as they come to you. And I'll be pausing every now and again to ask Rayvon to let me know what questions there are. So that way we can get them answered kind of all throughout. Okay, so the first place to think of, or the first place to start, is just kind of, what does inclusivity even mean? We throw around DEI or DIBS, you might have heard of, or DEIB. There's a variety of ways that we kind of talk about DEI, a variety of acronyms. But a good place to start is to figure out, what does inclusivity mean to you and what does it mean to your organization? And there's a lot of examples of us not stopping to take the time to figure out words like inclusivity. For example, employee engagement, that's another big phrase these days, or flexible work. These are subjective phrases, and it's up to the organization to decide. Here at this organization, flexible work means that you can choose between 8 and 7 p.m. for your working hours, or it could mean that you can be hybrid once a week or all the time, or it could mean that you don't have any working hours as long as you get your job done. So we tend to kind of create rules around things that we really understand or that feel more concrete. But if you think about something like employee engagement, or in this conversation, inclusivity, what does that mean to you and what does it mean to your organization? Using engagement as an example, often organizations tell me, or clients tell me, hey, we're doing an engagement survey. Well, what does that even mean? So we know that engagement is about discretionary effort, but how are you defining engagement? So if you use the Gallup Q12, they define engagement as enthusiasm. So if you're using their survey, then that means you as an organization are defining engagement as enthusiasm. You have to stop and figure out, is that really what we care about, enthusiasm? Or are we defining engagement differently, and do we need to find a different survey? So same for inclusivity. What does it really mean? Does it mean that people feel psychologically safe? Does it mean that people feel comfortable to speak up when they are at the receiving end of a microaggression all the way up to harassment? Does it mean that people aren't experiencing any sort of derogatory comments at all? So you've got to really plot out, what does this even mean? As you do that, then you can start to do surveys around whether or not you're actually inclusive. So to use the engagement survey as an example, if you decide engagement is about enthusiasm, then go and get the Gallup Q12. That's your survey. If you decide that engagement is about feeling challenged, feeling inspired, and feeling like you fit in, which is how Civility Partners defines engagement, then use our survey. So the same rule applies here. Once you figure out exactly what inclusivity means, because we throw it around, it's a very subjective word, how do you rate that? So if you were to use our inclusivity survey, for example, we define an inclusive truly as feeling psychologically safe to speak up in the moment, to report exclusive behaviors of any kind, and that you feel like the leadership team is really focused on inclusivity. So that's how we at Civility Partners define inclusivity. So those are the types of questions we're going to be asking about. So you can see some examples of the types of statements we're asking our survey takers to rate when we work with clients and do workforce surveys. I'm going to give you a little bit of a case study. I'm going to give you the front of the case study at the beginning, and then towards the end of the webinar, I'll kind of finish up and tell you what happened. So for example, we did a climate assessment, which is an assessment that measures lots of things. It measures engagement, job satisfaction, inclusivity, trust in leaders, communication processes, and efficiency. So we measured lots of things when we do climate assessments. And in this case, you can see that The Black workforce felt very differently about the rest of the organization. So for example, they felt that there was more harassment based on ethnicity. They felt that there was more harassment based on gender, and they were less satisfied in their jobs. They had less engagement. They felt that the leadership, their perception of leadership's commitment to diversity was very different than the rest of the organization. And they felt that the leaders weren't reaching out so that REL strategies stands for relationship strategies. They felt that leaders weren't reaching out to build relationships with them to the extent that the rest of the workforce felt. Another thing we saw there when we did this survey, and this was at a university inside of an IT department, you can also see that females felt that there was a whole lot more bullying among the workforce than the males did. So these are the types of things you can start to uncover if you're doing inclusivity surveys, or if you do a climate assessment that measures inclusivity as part of what it's measuring. So I'm going to leave that right there for you, and then I'm going to follow up with what happened in that case study a little bit later. So let's talk about the life cycle. So I'm going to take you through various ways that you can inject inclusivity throughout the life cycle. So of course, pre-hire refers to employer branding. It refers to all of the ways in which potential candidates may be interacting with your organization before they apply. And I think we often separate customers from potential candidates. That's easy to do if you work for, I don't know, an engineering firm. The average person out there probably isn't necessarily a client, versus if you're a clothing store in a mall, your client is also a potential employee, right? So either way, you have to be thinking about how potential candidates out there in the world are experiencing your organization. What's your brand as a potential employer? And even if you are in an engineering firm and you're thinking our potential employees and our customers are very different people, you want to be the same company all of the time, right? So you want to still be thinking about employer branding all of the time, because it certainly feeds into your customer brand and the brand that you have out there in the community. So some key ways to create an employer brand, and then I'm going to touch on inclusivity as it relates to brand. Be thinking about your vision and your mission and your core values, and showcasing your current employees, and definitely leaning into technology as you put your brand out there into the world. So just to give you some examples of that, of these 3 tips that I've given you. Let's start with using your vision, mission, and core values. So at Civility Partners, our vision is a world where every employee in every organization is thriving. It's our very, what's a BHAG, I think comes from the book Traction, the big, hairy, audacious goal. We're never going to achieve it. It's very aspirational, but it gives us direction. It's the pin in the map. 50 years from now, if we're still operating, we'd still be working towards that goal. And the way that we do that, our mission is to partner with our clients to help them create a positive work environment. And our core values are these 5 things. Be extraordinary, be legit, have a warrior spirit, go platinum, and learn a lot. And the idea behind the core values is that there is no way we can achieve our vision. There is no way we can engage with our mission. We can't do the things that our mission says we're doing unless we're behaving in these 5 ways. And that's how core values work. So from there, if you're looking at your own vision and mission, and you're looking at your core values, how can you use those to attract a certain kind of employee? How can you attract inclusivity, or people who care about inclusivity? How can you attract diverse candidates using your core values? So some suggestions are to make sure that the diverse group in your workforce, the people who are already there, that you've gotten feedback from your entire workforce about your core values. Do these core values match how we actually are, or are they just words on a website? Do these core values leave anybody out? Are there gender specific problems within the vernacular in our core values? Is it leaving out a certain group of people just because of our word choice? So these are the types of things that you want to be thinking about and sort of auditing your vision and your mission and your core values. Also, just a note on humans and how we function. Humans have to feel like we're engaging in meaningful work. It's a part of how we function. We need to eat and sleep, and we need to feel like we're engaged in meaningful work, and we need to feel included. So assuming that your organization is actually living the core values, then you can really use those to communicate what your culture is like, and that, hey, these are the types of people we're looking for. Okay, and then in terms of using technology as part of putting your brand out there, some suggestions for you. Certainly posting on social media. One example, just yesterday, I did an interview with a brand new employee of ours. So we did a quick LinkedIn Live. And I was able to introduce her and ask her some questions, and she talked about her background, and you know, it was just a great way to kind of say, here's a new employee, and we're showcasing this person that we hired. You know, thinking about adding a career section to your website. How is that looking? Have you audited your career section on your website to make sure that it's not leaving people out and that it's coming across as inclusive? Another example is to do webinars. So you could do little short recorded, you know, 5, 10, 15-minute webinars about your brand and put those on your website, put those out in social media so that you're attracting all sorts of people who have the opportunity to learn about you and decide, hey, I really want to look at that company. I really want to apply. And by the way, Gallup finds that 44% of people are job seekers. So the people in your organization may be hunting for a job without you knowing about it. We're all, you know, grass is always greener. So that's something to think about too. Just like a customer has to be told over and over again how great it is to shop there. Just using an example, I like to shop at Nordstrom's. I receive emails from Nordstrom's reminding me how great it is to shop there. I receive coupons so that I come back. They have a loyalty program so that I'll come back. So Nordstrom's is constantly reminding me as their customer that, hey, don't forget to shop at Nordstrom's. We're right over here. We're right here online. And we don't do that with our employees. And so you need to start doing that with your employees, reminding your employees, hey, this is a great place to work. Here's that benefit that we talked about. Oh, here's another benefit. Oh, here's another benefit over here. Let me remind you about that. So think about the way that your, you know, the vendors out there in the world that you interact with as a customer, how do they keep you engaged? And start leaning into that as you're looking at employer branding and reminding your employees about how great it is to work for you. Lastly, here in this section is to really showcase, you know, your employees. So using employees in your branding so that when employees or potential candidates are looking at what you offer, that they can say, oh, I see employees that look like me, so I'm interested in applying there. I see that you have benefits that run the gamut for a variety of age ranges or a variety of groups, so I'm interested in that. Again, putting video out there in the world, asking employees to talk about the core values and how they're lived every day, asking employees to talk about their favorite benefit that they really use all the time that your organization offers. So just to give you a quick example of that, Home Depot's career page, you can see they've got a variety of people showcased there. They highlight the fact that they're interested in vets. They have a commitment to the military. We'd like to hire you in here. And you can see based on the benefits they've laid out, they have things like commuter benefits. So you don't have to live within the vicinity of a Home Depot. They have benefits for you to commute to Home Depot. I would assume there's flexible work there too if you're in the corporate office. You know, they've got 401ks. Generally, 401ks speak more to the older generation. That's going to attract the older generation versus a Gen Z. So, you know, what are all the different types of benefits you could offer that meet the different needs of your employees. And you can discover these types of things when you do that assessment. So if you were to lay out all of the benefits that you have in your employee assessment, and you can have people rate what are the most important to them, and then possibly have another section that says, here's other types of benefits, would you want these, and find out what people are looking for. So these are all things. So I'm going to stop for a second and take a sip of water. Rayvon, I called you Raylyn, which is my little son's best friend. Rayvon, do you have any questions that you see coming through?
Yes, this first one is coming in from Emily, and she wants to know, how often do you administer these assessments? Or how often should you, to make sure you're keeping that pulse, lively?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll tell you from my own experience, when we go into organizations, often we're going in to solve a problem, right? So like that IT department at that university, they had a big Me Too moment with several women coming forward about the way that they had been treated. And so we're often doing sort of a big, large assessment. We're interviewing people, we're doing surveys. And you kind of need to do that right up front to really say, okay, there's problems that we're seeing and we need to uncover them. So we're going to really dig in here. Once you've done that sort of larger, big survey, I would say a year or 18 months later, 12 to 18 months later, you need to do a second version of that same big survey as a push to say, here were a lot of problems. Let's understand all those big problems that we may have solved or not. And then from there, you can start doing a pulse survey, which could be a shorter version. And I would say at the very, very least doing it annually. But that even, things change so quick these days, even quarterly would be better. So the more often you're doing them, the shorter they can be. And they don't always necessarily have to be the same question over and over again, versus when we do our big giant one, and then the follow-up one, it's apples to apples. So it's the same question every time, or the same set of questions every time. So hopefully that helps. So if you haven't ever done a survey before, do kind of a big one. And then from there, you can do the quarterly.
Oh, that's such a great answer. Thank you. And I actually just had a follow-up come in from Amari. Amari asked, how do you recommend engaging with employees at organizations that have survey fatigue? So that's kind of a really great follow-up to that answer that you gave us.
Yeah, I would ask, why do they have survey fatigue? What are the surveys that you're putting out there? So are you doing an engagement survey, and then a couple months later you're doing a well-being, health and well-being survey, and then a couple months later you're doing some other type of survey? So yes, that's going to create survey fatigue. All of those things are related to your culture, and that's why we do a climate assessment, so that the climate assessment gets at everything all at one time. And then you don't need to do surveys over and over again. So once you switch to doing pulse surveys, you can ask a couple questions from each category, and that's going to eliminate the survey fatigue. So I guess I would love to talk with you more offline about what exactly you're surveying about. Why do people have survey fatigue? And can we shorten or reduce the amount of surveys that you're putting out there?
Thank you for that answer. And thank you, Amari, for such an insightful question there. Back to you, Catherine.
Good questions. Good questions. All right. So I'm going to jump on to the next thing, which is recruiting. So you've been putting your employer brand out there, right? Making it known that we're inclusive. And I'll just add one other thing regarding the assessments. How cool would it be to do an assessment and figure out that, let's say, 70% of people trust leadership and 30% of people don't. And then you make changes, and the next survey you do shows that 97% of people trust leadership. Now you've really made a big difference. And I would argue, I don't know if you would agree with this, but that you could even put that data on your careers site, or if you're doing ongoing blog posts about what it's like to work there. to say we did a survey and figured out we had some problems and we made some changes. Here's what we did, and here's the new results. You know, I would love to apply for an organization that's doing surveys and actually responding to the results. So another way to lean into that data, you can actually use it for branding. So inclusive recruiting. So again, you know, obviously, I think it's doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. Inclusive recruiting is about ensuring that you're bringing in a pool of candidates from a variety of groups. You're not leaving people out. And so some tips around that is to use a very wide sourcing method. If you do something like post on Indeed and then hope you get a variety of candidates, that's a little like tacking a help wanted sign to the window of a storefront and hoping people walk by. You've got to be a little more focused on being inclusive. There's more effort there. So I'm going to walk you through some of these tips here. So in terms of using a wide sourcing method, think about the underrepresented groups. You know, if you're hiring, well, I live in San Diego. I'm going to use San Diego as an example. We have a huge Latinx population because we're right on the border of Mexico. If I don't have any Latinx people working at my organization, I'm missing something. I'm not doing my due diligence to get the right candidates in here. We also have a very big LGBTQ community here in San Diego. If I don't have candidates, at least from that group, I'm also missing the boat. So you've got to go to where the people are. So I could be going down to Southwestern Community College down in Chula Vista, where 99% of the students are Latinx, and be looking for employees or potential candidates there. I could be going to the LGBTQ Community Center to find out, can they help me post my job and, you know, bring in people from that group. So going above and beyond to meet people where they are. And so identifying who are the communities that we need to get in here that we're lacking. Also making sure that your job ads are inclusive. So making sure that you're auditing job ads for gender, language, saying things like digital native, that's an ageism type of a problem. You know, also thinking about what's actually required of the position. So if you are requiring, for example, a bachelor's degree, there's a lot of underrepresented groups out there that don't have access to having a bachelor's degree. So are you leaving people out by having that requirement, or is it actually needed? So really rethinking the things that you've listed as requirements. Are they actually required or just nice to haves? And if they are required, are there ways to get access to underrepresented groups to help them get that bachelor's degree so that they can apply? A really great example actually of doing that is Etsy. Etsy is a technology platform, right? It's an app, and then there's people who sell things. But it's a technology company. And so I think we all know IT is lacking lots of females not coding, lots of males are coding. And so they started doing scholarship programs. They do programs for young girls to code, and then they do scholarships for college to get women into coding. So Etsy's sort of creating its own pipeline by doing these things so that they can start bringing women in. So rather than going, oh gosh, there aren't any women who code, I guess we'll hire another man, they're actually proactively creating a pipeline for themselves. And then how much loyalty would you have to Etsy if they supported you to get a college degree and then hired you into their organization? And then, of course, adding diversity to your hiring team. So making sure that it's not one type of group of people who are on the panel, making sure that you have diversity so that you can address bias by doing that you have different perspectives, and you're going to learn a lot. It's no secret I'm white. So if I'm hiring with a committee of people who are different than me, a person of color, an LGBTQ community member, you know, an older female or a younger male, you know, if there's different people, I'm going to learn a lot about their perspectives about hiring and their perspectives about what the organization needs. And so then it's a great opportunity for everyone on the hiring process to learn. And then of course, bonus, candidates could see, oh, there's diverse people in the hiring process. Now, don't engage in tokenism. I don't want you saying, oh, well, we've got one Black person, let's make sure they're on the hiring committee. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, choosing your hiring committee carefully and making sure that you've got a variety of opinions. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions at this point, and also check the time, see how much time I have. Okay.
Yes, we did get a great question that comes in from Jessica. Jessica asks, are there any tools or websites for gender neutral language on job postings or any diversity focused job boards you could recommend to help with creating these job ads?
Yes, there are. So I believe Upskill is the name of it, Upskill. And then someone said something yesterday that I wish I remembered what it was. I meant to write it down and of course didn't. Oh, I'm going to think about it and see if I can get it to come into my brain before this is over. But I will say there are plenty of DEI consultants out there, for example, who can help audit your job descriptions. And, you know, to your point, I'm actually going to have my team do a bunch of research and see if we can write a blog post with some resources on that. I think that would be helpful to my audience too. But you know, so I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but I think there are plenty of resources out there. You could pass the job descriptions around your company. There's no reason they have to stick within HR, or pass the job advertisements around to the company and see, you know, what thoughts people have. And I'm going to give an example of this because this was a situation that sort of was a good slap in the face for a leadership team in one of my clients. I had a client who leadership was all white. They did have probably 50 to 60% of their workforce was Latinx, but none of them were in the leadership roles. And the leadership team put out an email asking if any of the Spanish-speaking employees would be willing to translate some documents. And so then I was kind of their acting director of HR. I get a call from a couple of the Spanish speakers there on staff who are telling me that this was a pretty insulting request because here a lot of the Spanish speakers were making, I don't know, $20 to $50 an hour depending on their role. But if you hire a translator, that's $120 to $150 an hour. And then, so there was that piece of it, kind of like, yeah, I might, you know, do a couple lines, but if you're asking me to engage in this real deep translation process, I should be paid as a translator. And then secondly, it just felt insulting, you know, rather than looking for a translation expert, of which there, you know, you have to get certified and all this stuff, that it felt a little thoughtless that they had sent that out. And so it was a great example of, hey, if they had had a Spanish speaking person on their leadership team, that email never would have gone out because the Spanish speaker would have been there to say, hey, here's why I would not send that out. And so that's an example. I think it was a really great example of why you need to lean into your team. So even if your leadership team or your HR team or your hiring team is all one group, you can still collect information from other people in your workforce. So that was a very long answer to your question. But use your employees as a resource. That's the short version. Any other questions?
Yeah, this one has to do with actually the hiring team. This person wants to know, how do you ensure that you give an inclusive interview or you portray the diversity if your company doesn't necessarily have a lot of diversity at the moment?
I get that question a lot, kind of like, where do we start? And the answer is, you gotta start somewhere, and you gotta get 1 and then 2 and then 3 people into your organization who are diverse, right? So it's a tough place, because I'm not suggesting that you say, well, we're going to leave, for example, all of the white people out and just make sure that we have people of color applying for this role. But I am saying, if you go to the communities where underrepresented people are, where people of color are, the LGBTQ community or the military, ex-military community, any of these types of things, there's a job site even, or a recruiting site for working moms even, I've seen. So if you go to those places, the idea is that you collect resumes that represent your entire community. And that's why you have to be vigilant about going out to them. And then through that process, you're going to have one diverse person, and then you'll have another, and then you'll have another. And over time, another thing to advertise on your career site is we've increased the number of, X group in our workforce by 10% over the last 3 years, or whatever it is. So you just kind of have to start somewhere. And I'm not suggesting you fake it, and that's why I'm saying don't do the tokenism thing. You have to be honest and authentic about it. And it's okay to say, hey, we're a panel of white people on this interview panel, but please understand that diversity is super important to us, and here's what we've been doing to take action in that. And that's all you can do, right? So hopefully that helps.
That's a great answer there. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about onboarding. So this is the next phase, right? So we did our pre-hire, our employer branding, we're doing our recruiting. Once we've hired somebody, we need to onboard them. And this is where I think employers get stuck, right? Because they have core values that they've enticed somebody to join the organization with, or they've told someone from an underrepresented group there in the organization that we care about this. But then all of a sudden the employee starts getting onboarded and realizing it was all a bunch of hooey. So you've got to make sure that if you're going to be advertising yourself as inclusive, that it's showing up everywhere, and onboarding is one of those places. And so some thoughts about onboarding. One is onboarding is different than orientation, right? Orientation is like, here's the policies, here's who you report to, that sort of thing. Onboarding is about bringing people into the culture of the organization. And so we're going to go through some of these tips here. So of course, being welcoming sounds easy, but I'm amazed at how many organizations are not welcoming. I heard a story recently about a new hire that had to empty out a closet because that was going to be her office, and they left the closet full of stuff and had her cleared out for herself, and then set up her own office in there. Not really a great welcoming tactic. So some thoughts: introducing the team before their first day. You could certainly send them a little video, get everyone who they're going to be working with to create a video. Hey, we're looking forward to seeing you. Here's my name. Here's what I do. Here's my name. Here's what I do. And kind of create that environment of, hey, we're looking forward to including you here in our team. Don't use a bunch of templates out there in the world. Be unique for your organization as well as for them. And make sure you're prepared for their first day, and just really making sure that they feel excitement that they're starting with you, not feeling, oh gosh, everybody's annoyed that I'm here because now they all have to take the time out of their day to train me. You want them to feel excited. This is a celebration, and you need your new hires to feel that. I also recommend making sure that you include everyone in your onboarding. So for example, we have what we call the ultimate onboarding checklist, and I just wanted to point you to this kind of one piece. So we've got it before they start, the first day, the second day, the first week, the second week, the third week, and it goes all the way through to 6 months of what should be happening and who should be doing it. And so you'll notice that we have the HR section, but then we also have a manager section. Here's the things a manager should be doing, and also the team that this person's going to be working with. here's what the team members should be doing. So onboarding is a group effort. It's not just HR. It's not just managers. It's not just the person who's supposed to train them on their job. It's everyone. And I'm going to give you an example of something fun that I've heard. I've never been able to convince anyone to do this. Maybe you'll be it. Maybe I'll convince you. I was reading a blog once on interesting onboarding ideas, and one of the ideas in there was a tech firm that said whenever they had a new hire, by the end of the week on a Friday, of course this was all before COVID, on Friday of that person's first week, they basically had a celebration, and they had a kind of a throne for the new hire to sit on, so that the new hire, you know, it was very clear, this party is for you, we're celebrating you, you get to sit in the king or queen chair. And then the whole company would do a dance, kind of like, we're entertaining you. How welcomed would you feel if an organization did something like that for you? So maybe you're the one, you're gonna pick up that onboarding tip. Okay, so then also, of course, ensuring you're checking in often. And so I would recommend a buddy system, and I would recommend a formal buddy system. I know a lot of organizations sort of throw the buddy system out there, but it's not really formalized. So just making sure that they have checkpoints with various people, definitely a buddy. And I'll just share, we have a buddy system template. I'm happy to give it to you. And actually also that onboarding thing. So if you email us at info@civilitypartners.com, I'm happy to send this to you. It's a formal buddy system program. And the way it works is the buddy and the new hire both have kind of a worksheet that matches up, so they're kind of following the same process. We've given some agenda items for your first meetings, some tips and things to know. So feel free to reach out, info@civilitypartners.com if you want that, along with the onboarding, the ultimate onboarding checklist. And then in terms of bringing inclusion, so we're welcoming them, we're making them feel like we've got you a buddy. It's a formalized process, so you have everything you need. And also DEI matters to us, in addition to just welcoming you as a new employee, helping the new hire recognize through conversations about inclusivity, through sharing resources, through getting other team members to talk about the ways in which your organization is focused on inclusivity. So just really, you know, making sure that this is kind of an ongoing conversation and at the forefront of your onboarding program. And you know what, I'll say this too. We need to proactively build a positive work environment, right? We need to proactively build inclusivity, psychological safety, respect into our day-to-day behaviors of our employees. And so if you take nothing else away from this webinar, the one major tip I have for you that's free and cheap is to just have conversations about these topics often. And the more you talk about them, the more it's going to influence the nuanced interactions that people have. So that's my one huge tip. Any questions here, Rayvon?
Yes. So this next question is coming in from Sabrina. Sabrina says, what can HR do about inclusivity and diversity if the owner of the company is not really showing that they're accepting that or trying to get in that? So essentially getting management buy-in.
Yeah, I have two answers. One is I kind of joke that HR has to be a ninja, right? We have to find ways to integrate the things that we know need to happen, sometimes without the leadership's permission. And so there are certain things you could do. For example, perhaps you could, at the very least, talk your owner of your company into, you know, at least a training. We all know training's not going to make the company inclusive. It's not going to change people's behavior, but that's an action item that feels probably not too threatening to the owner. And you can kind of sell it as, look, this is a big topic. Everybody's doing it. We should do it too. And then once you've done that, maybe you can open up the door for another type of a thing. Hey, I was reading this book about building inclusive environments, and here's something simple that we could do. So in some ways, I think you just have to kind of push over time, because everyone's on a different journey in terms of DEI, right? And so that owner may be at the beginning of the journey. And so all you can do is attempt to influence them in little ways. And again, you know, training, I always hate to give that as an idea because we know that doesn't solve problems, but it's one way to start to open the door for conversation, at least for everyone else, even if the owner's not interested. So that's one answer. My other answer is, if DEI is really important to you and you're not able to influence the owner at all about that topic, then you have to decide, do I want to be here and just kind of not get to do the things that I know are important, or should I go somewhere else where it's important? And that's my answer. And I say that a lot too. I get a lot of questions about workplace bullying, for example. What if the CEO is the bully? Or what if the CEO won't address the vice president who's the bully and they just let it happen? Same kind of an answer, right? You have to decide what your core values are, and if you are interested in sticking around in an organization that doesn't match your core values. And that's what it's all about. You have to be in an organization that matches your core values. Okay, so moving into retention. So this is kind of the rest of the life cycle, keeping your employees interested in working there. So of course, culture really comes into play here. And culture is that sort of just how it is around here, right? That's the norms of the organization, most of which are not spoken norms. And I'll say too that culture really and truly lives in the little nuanced interactions that you have all throughout the day with your team. So you could have respect as a core value or diversity as a core value, but if my interactions with my team, there's a lot of microaggressions and comments about being the only woman on the team and so on, then it doesn't matter what the core values are. To me, the culture is that it's very exclusive and leaving females out, right? So and that's another way to kind of be an HR ninja, right? If you can influence managers and supervisors to pay attention to and influence those little nuanced interactions that happen within their team, that's huge. So it doesn't have to be a big organizational to do. It's great if it could be, but it doesn't have to be that. If you have a leader who's not interested in doing a big organizational DEI initiative, at least try to influence the supervisors and managers, because it's those little nuanced interactions that matter. That's how we understand culture. So some tips that I'll go over here. Of course, collaboration is super important, and collaboration is about inclusivity. You might consider having a more open office. You might consider holding staff meetings that are creating the room for collaboration. I'll tell you something that my team does. Some of us are in San Diego, some of us are not. What we do is we have a Google Hangouts link that's open. You know, we're all in there. It's a standard link. It's in every day. You can go to that very same link, and people are in there or not. So obviously I'm not in there because I'm here with you, but my team probably is, or at least a couple of team members are. And that's a way that we've really been able to build collaboration, because it emulates being in the office together, even though we're not. And it's really great because then you start kind of going, you know, just having that office talk of like, oh my gosh, I just got a text from my mom, my kid did X, Y, and Z, and that reminds me this weekend, here's a picture, and we all, you know, hold the phone up to the webcam. And then you get that email that you've been waiting for from that one client. Oh, that client finally emailed. Now we can do X, Y, and Z. So it provides the ability to just have chit chat because we're in Google Hangouts. So that's one way that we've really built collaboration here. Another, of course, important aspect of your culture is making sure that people feel like they have the opportunity to grow and learn. That's another basic human need. We need to eat and sleep and learn and grow. It's important to us. So asking employees, what is it that you'd like to learn, so we can ensure that you have that. making sure that your managers and supervisors understand how to coach people to help them reach their goals. And that's a super important piece if you're focused on equity and inclusion, ensuring that everybody has the ability to grow in the path that they want to grow. Everybody needs a coach, and definitely your underrepresented groups need coaches because they have more challenges. There's more hiccups for them along the way. So having some coaching available to your organizational members is a big piece of building an inclusive work environment. Certainly there's tons of resources out there as well. You could have everyone read a certain book and then have a book club. You could have everybody, I was looking at celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month the other day, a blog, and they had listed some movies, like do a showing where everybody watches the movie together. You can do that virtually as well. And then that way everybody can talk about it after. So those are some of the types of ideas. And of course, making sure that everybody's sharing their ideas. And, you can do simple things like in a suggestion box of some sort. You could do making sure that people have one-on-one meetings, creating safe spaces for sharing. So I'm going to give you an example of, I'm going to go back to that case study. So we often go into sort of toxic environments where some sort of problem has emerged and leadership is now sort of forced into paying attention to a problem that HR was probably telling them was there, but they weren't listening or taking it seriously. So you saw earlier with those charts that the Black workforce and the female workforce saw the organization very differently. They also had several females who had come forward and posted very publicly in some apparently very important kind of blogs and social media where IT people hang out. These women, there was 5 of them, had been very vocal in those channels. So what we do is we do a climate assessment, and then we present that data at a town hall meeting to everyone in the organization. And we, they get a summary of the results. Here's some stuff that was really bad. Here's some stuff that was really good. And the way that we start to build collaboration and trust is we use what's called an action team. And the action team is made up of 8 people from different levels in the organization. And the action team is the one that we work with to facilitate some action planning. So this is an example from that same IT department. There were 5 objectives total in their action plan for changing the culture. But here are 3 of them. So building trust, people didn't trust leadership because of things that had happened. We needed to make sure that every single day, everyone in the workforce was focused on their own awareness and behavior. And then of course, we needed to start focusing on equity. And so some of the goals within those things, for example, was the performance management system felt that it wasn't fair. I know, for example, they had a leadership program that the university ran, and every department could send people there. And so this IT department was seemingly willy-nilly choosing people and sending them to the leadership program, and not being transparent about why, how people get selected. So those are the types of things that feel very inequitable, right? And then after we create the objectives and the goals, then we start creating action items. So here were some of the types of action items that we did. A super cool one was we opened up a Google Doc, and there were 900 employees total, and we said, if you've got some sort of community place where you hang out and they have some sort of job board, or you're willing to pass along job openings, stick them in here. And so now all of a sudden their ability to recruit diverse candidates opened up quite a bit just by adding all of these job boards. So that was a pretty cool thing to see how many people had something to say about where to post job postings. We also crowdsourced interview questions so that people had a say in what kind of questions would be asked of new candidates when they came in, to make sure that they could live and breathe in an inclusive environment. So these were some of the types of things that we did. Okay, so then lastly, in terms of exiting, the last phase of the life cycle, just keep in mind that if employees experience a negative culture, they're definitely going to talk about it. So your focus on employer branding starts at the pre-hire and goes all the way through. And also keeping in mind that good employees can be hard to come by. It's definitely an employee's market right now. And even if you have to lay off employees, you can do it delicately and in a way that prepares them for the future. So for example, you could do, giving people you're laying off some resources for writing their resume or updating their resume, or hiring them a job hunter to help them find a new job. So these are the types of things that you can do. So keeping in mind that even exiting employees are going to talk about you, and you want to maintain your core values even as you're letting people go or as they're exiting. So with that, I think we probably have a couple more minutes for questions. We have 4 minutes for questions. You can find me at civilitypartners.com. Certainly email me at info@civilitypartners.com to get those resources. And I appreciate everyone tuning in.
Thank you so much for that. So really quick here, I think we have time for at least one more question. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions throughout this session. Don't forget to register for psychological safety and employee well-being, building a healthy and accountable work environment, which I think is going to be a great session right after the one that we had today. This session is presented by Tracy Spanenberg, CHRO at the Granite Group, and Melissa Doman, organizational psychologist and mental health at work specialist. Don't miss out and register today. We're going to go ahead and send that registration link to the chat box right now. Okay, so just quickly jumping into these questions here. This next question I feel like is such an important one that we get all the time. How do you address one person engaging in exclusive behaviors like microaggression?
Ooh, good one. So this goes back to the manager and supervisor training, right? And this is something I see all the time in my clients, where nobody has been telling the managers and supervisors that they're accountable for not only the performance of their team members, but the behavior of their team members. So don't leave that piece out. That's part of performance management. So a big step would be to train managers and supervisors on how to coach people who engage in something like sarcasm or a microaggression or gossip, these sort of lower level things. So organizations get so caught up on, anti-harassment, but that's so far down the chain of behaviors. Bring it back and give everyone some tools and resources on addressing those things up front. Also, we've been doing a ton of bystander to ally training, which addresses the skill needed. So employees aren't just going to speak up when there's a microaggression unless they've been given tools and resources and told that the organization supports them in doing that. So giving people tools to, in the moment or right after a staff meeting, to pull their coworker aside and say, hey, you said this thing. I just wanted to kind of let you know, give you a teachable moment. So that's my answer. And just know too, the more you allow that stuff to happen, the bigger it gets. So those little microaggressions or moments of incivility absolutely can escalate over time. So you need to address them early.
Such a great answer there to close out our session. We only have 1 minute left, and I want to make sure that we had time to, fully answer questions. So that is all the time that we had for today. I hope everyone learned as much as I did. Thanks to our sponsor, Ergotron, and a huge thank you to you, Catherine, for taking the time to give us such fantastic insights.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I hope everyone enjoys their Thursday and have the fantastic rest of your week.